Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Breaking the Game show here on the Nothing But Net channel on Dash Radio. I'm Stephen Gillespie, one of the co-hosts here at Breaking the Game, and then the other co-host is joining me live right now, and that is Mr. Kenneth Cotterill. Kenneth, what's up, my brother?
Not too much, man. Just enjoying a nice, relaxing Sunday here. Excited to talk some NBA hoops today. Just a busy time in sports as a whole. When we're talking about college basketball, we got some major tournaments finishing up today as well. So there's some exciting games there. And then you got NFL and NBA later on today. So just a lot happening in the sports world, but excited to chat with you today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know that you did bets on bets earlier. If you're watching this live, hopefully you tuned in to Kenneth and Patrick talking about bets on bets. It's also here on the Nothing But Net channel on Dash Radio. But if you're listening and you don't know what I'm talking about, go over and follow Kenneth at shooters_pod. All of his links to all of his shows are right there on his Twitter as well. And you can get caught up and go win some money. Fade shooters, but trail Pat, right? That's the saying on the show.
That's the saying right now. A tough. I think I'm 1-5 the last 2 weeks, and Pat, since week one of the NFL season, he's up to 21-6, I believe. So
Wow.
he's been on absolute fire. He's gone 6-0 the last 2 weeks, so he's someone to definitely keep an eye on this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, speaking of keeping an eye on people, that's exactly what we've been doing so far in this little over a month of NBA action. In today's episode, Kenneth, we're going to be highlighting and giving grades, a progress report of sorts, here for the rookies that were taken during this last year's draft. Just to kind of frame it, Kenneth, we're going to walk through everyone that was taken in the lottery. It would be really cool if we got to grade, all 60 of these players and then mention some of the undrafted and whatnot and get really super nerdy in there. But for time constraints and for everybody's sanity and for our family's sake, we're only going to cover the lottery, and then we're each going to nominate one other player that wasn't selected within that lottery who is also having a good season, and we're going to evaluate them as well. Kenneth, before we get into that, though, why don't you tell the nice listeners and viewers about our new sponsor at Off the Ball Network, Built Bar?
Definitely. Built Bar is the newest sponsor of the Off the Ball Network. Unlike all other bars out there that taste either like old Play Doh or a piece of cardboard, when you eat a Built Bar, you think you're cheating on your diet with a delicious chocolate dessert. If your kids find out how good these are, you're going to have to buy more because they will be begging for them. They have great flavors such as cookies and cream, double chocolate, strawberry, and peanut butter brownie, and much, much more. Built Bar now is a mystery flavor as well, where if you can guess the flavor correctly, you could win a prize. So head over to built.com and use the promo code off the ball, no spaces, all caps, at checkout to get a 10% discount. That's off the ball in all caps for that. My fiance and I bought some, absolutely love them, putting in a second order this week as we try and get back on our fitness journey. It really helps when you've got some great bars like that. So super excited to continue with this partnership with Built Bar. They've got some great products over there.
Yeah, and I haven't, just being upfront, I haven't had any yet, right? But hearing the way that you talk about them, I know Prez has ordered them. They got a lot of other great products there as well. If you're into your health and fitness, maybe I need to. Maybe that's what the motivation I need, because I have no excuse. I've been married for 12 years. We're not impressing each other anymore. But to keep yourself healthy for you and your family, go over to built.com, enter in promo code off the ball, all caps, no spaces, and you can get 10%. I mean, that's a deal in of it itself. So, Kenneth, we're going to roll right from our new sponsor to some new players in the NBA this season. We're going to open it up. We're going to walk down the lottery, literally. We're not going to talk about the top prospect in the 13th and then the 7th or whatever. We're just going to go line for line, player for player, and we're going to assign grades as we deem appropriate. And starting it off was the number one pick, obviously, in the draft, was Cade Cunningham for the Detroit Pistons. Now, he was a little bit of a polarizing prospect coming into the season because he missed time from summer league moving on, and he made his debut and it didn't look the prettiest. It wasn't as aesthetically pleasing, but Cade's been rolling as of late. He's looking like there was a little bit of valor and a little bit of common sense into his being selected number one overall. Kenneth, we're giving actual letter grades here. What is your letter grade for Cade Cunningham?
I went B minus for Cade Cunningham. Like when it comes to these progress reports, I think a lot that goes into it as well, at least for me, is that where they got selected plays a factor as well, because we can't expect a guy drafted in the 20s to be playing as many minutes as a guy that was selected first overall. Like that's just unrealistic. It happens occasionally, but not too often. So K did a B minus. I mean, people were calling him a bust through 2 games, which I thought was absolutely hilarious. And I tweeted it out, and I've been posting it like weekly, like just a reminder, like he's not. Like, let's calm down a bit. Like, even you look at his most recent game at Golden State, 19-6-6. He had a couple steals, couple blocks. Like, that's from a number 1 overall pick. And yes, Detroit doesn't win the game, but we didn't expect Detroit to win many games this year. They're sitting at 4-11 out of the gate. So I think B minus is appropriate. Like his shooting percentages are low. Like he especially struggled in those first couple games when he was shooting like 2 for 15. Like that's obviously going to hurt the numbers, but I still think that he's performing how we thought that he was going to, which is that he was going to do a lot of things out there, almost like a LaMelo Ball in his rookie year where, you know, he distributes, he rebounds, he scores. Like he does a lot of that stuff. He's not quite up to that level yet, but I think that he could definitely get there by the time the year is all said and done. So I think B minus is appropriate given the small sample size that we've seen from him too, because he's only played 10 games. So his availability wasn't there for the first couple weeks.
Yeah, my grade doesn't vary too much from yours. I gave him a C plus, and I'm a nerd. You know, I weighed. You know, he was taking the number 1 overall pick, so you have to evaluate them as the top player in the draft. So as we go through all these grades, where they were selected is going to play a pretty big part of my grade as well. I went C plus because he looks like a guy that was considered to be taken number 1 overall in the draft. He hasn't stepped onto the scene and given us, a LeBron James, a Larry Bird, Magic Johnson type, opening season. But he looks like he's going to be very well. And I wrote a new piece on Substack, Stephen G. Hoops at Substack here. And one of the things that I wrote about this guy and the guy we're going to be talking about next is it's hard for these guys at their positions, Cade and Jalen Green, to pop because of how deep their positions are. These guys are lining up against some of the very best players in the NBA, and it's going to be hard for Cade to look as good as, the top tier at his position so young, whereas a guy like number 3 pick Evan Mobley is popping off the screen because who is considered the best power forward in the NBA? That's a whole conversation in of itself. So Cade, he looks like a number 1 pick. He's not really popping as much as, a lot of people would like to see a number 1 overall pick, but he is steady. He's making smart plays. He definitely looks like he's going to help Detroit turn things around up there. And he's even got a guy like Killian Hayes showing flashes of where he was selected in the prior season. So Cade Cunningham overall C plus, obviously has a lot of room to grow. He looks like a good leader. He's putting up numbers. The efficiency is not there, but Kenneth, he's still figuring out the game. I'm not wavering in my faith in him either.
When it comes to the efficiency side too, like it's probably going to be a theme today when we're going through these players. It's not there for a lot of them. And that doesn't mean that they're bad players. They're rookies that are trying to figure it out. Like they probably put up 4 or 5 shots a game that they shouldn't, or they could find better shots. And that's all. And that's the difference when you look at like a guy like Cade's 36% shooting. From a guard, we'd like to see him probably around 45. So in order for him to get there, all it takes is to take a couple better shots a game, and he gets there very quickly. So it's not like they're that far off from getting there. It's just you got to get the reps, you got to get the minutes. And so a lot, especially with these top guys, they're going to get ample opportunity in their minutes to learn and grow this year.
Yeah, and he needs a little bit better team around him. There's a reason why he was taken number 1 overall in this draft, is because Detroit doesn't really have a lot of, shot creators for themselves and for other people around them, right? So Cade having to do a lion's share of the work because there's really no other Lions there in Detroit. So, well, I mean, there are other Lions in Detroit, but not playing basketball there. They play football, and they don't do that well either. So, all right, Kenneth, dad jokes aside, we will slide from number 1 pick to number 2. Jalen Green playing for the Houston Rockets. I mean, this guy coming out of the G League, Kenneth, he was, considered the sexy pick. He has, that superstar swagger about him. He's got when he was drafted, he came out with the grill and everything. I mean, he was looking like a superstar in the making. And just like Cade Cunningham, actually maybe a step back. I'm interested to see where you have him graded, but not living up to that bill as of yet. But Kenneth, do we really need to preface every pick going forward? Can we just establish that we know that for all these kids that they're rookies and that the season is still young? We don't have to say that every time, do we?
No, we don't. And
okay.
And so that's why, like, Jalen Green, for me, I have him much lower. I have him at a C minus, but he's shown flashes too. Like, even if you look over his last 5 games, because what we evaluated him on was scoring. That was the big thing about him. We thought that he was Anthony Edwards from last year. And to be honest, he's kind of played like Anthony Edwards from last year early on, because his last 5 games, he's had 16 points, 21 points, 15, 12, and 9. So, he's had some games where he's got it going a bit. Efficiency, once again, still not there. Not a major issue. But the way that he was touted this year, like, they were expecting him to be like an 18-point, 20-point scorer his rookie year, which can be unfair given that you're putting those kind of expectations on, but that comes with being the number 2 pick. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see this as an Anthony Edwards situation where the shooting's at 37 right now. I think he comes on strong later on in the year and he starts to figure it out. Plus, he might be on an all-time bad team. Like, they've lost 14 games in a row. And I talked about this on my show, and you'll hear it later on today on Dash Radio. But talking about Houston, like, they're not winning games, and like, it's not close. Like they were close last night with the Knicks, and they led most of the game. But like most young teams, they lose. So
they don't know how to figure it out at the end of the game.
Yeah, and I think you'll see guys like Eric Gordon get moved, which, that's good for him. Not great for the team, because I think he's a guy that could help a guy like Jalen Green grow. But in the meantime, I mean, I think it's appropriate. 14, 3-2 guy for the number 2 pick. I think those numbers will grow as the year goes on, but the shooting efficiency has been low so far. So I think he has to get punished a bit. And the fact that his team is 1 win doesn't help either.
Yeah, the winning, like most things, I don't really weigh a team success into an individual reward type thing or grade in this instance. But, a guy who's supposed to carry this team, let's also not forget, if we were giving out grades here, that Kevin Porter Jr. hasn't really lived up to the hype that was built up around him for this season. So there's really no table setter on this team, and it looks like Jalen Green is trying to assert himself into that role as well, which, like you mentioned earlier, Kenneth, wasn't really what we were expecting from him coming into the season. So he's having to figure things out on a multitude of fronts. I, like you, have him a little bit behind Cade Cunningham. I have him as a C overall. I mean, C minus to a C, that's really not that big a difference, considering that we didn't even consult each other. We separately graded these players. And I think for a lot of the same reasons you have him as a C minus is why I put him as a C. The inefficiency, and again, I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of what we said we're not going to talk about earlier, but there's a reason why young players struggle, and young teams, like you alluded to or pointed out earlier, is that they have to figure out how to best play around these other stars, right? And like I talked about with Cade, Jalen has that same instance where he's playing in a position where that's shared between guys like a Klay Thompson, who's supposed to be coming back around Christmas time, Devin Booker, Donovan Mitchell, CJ McCollum, the list goes on and on and on. James Harden, he plays in that same position. So when a guy struggles, you start hearing murmurs of that B word from, these casual observers in NBA circles. And it's just like, all right, man, like, you have to let this kid figure things out. He's playing on a bad team. A lot has being thrust upon his shoulders. He'll figure it out eventually, but right now we're not seeing that. And again, these numbers you pointed out earlier, Kenneth, it's fine for a rookie. It's fine for a number 2 overall pick on a bad team, which is why he's still at a C. C's get degrees, am I right, Kenneth? So he's still doing all right. It's just that he's not standing head and shoulders above everybody else, much like the next guy that we're going to be talking about, Kenneth. I mean, before he got hurt, Evan Mobley was setting the world on fire. I mean, the Cleveland Cavaliers were in headlines with Evan Mobley. That alone should bolster his grade a lot, that Cleveland was even being discussed this season. But Kenneth, I'm really interested to see the grade that you gave Evan, because I was pretty high on him. How are you feeling about him?
Because of the injury, it dropped him down to a B plus. Because full disclosure, I only have 2 players that are even have an A letter grade next to their names.
I only have 1.
And so, like, Evan was my 3rd until he got hurt, because he is going to miss 2 to 4 weeks. It is an elbow issue, which is a bit concerning, because we know how important that is for your overall shooting stroke and everything else in the league. So, but prior to getting hurt, 14-8, like, really impressive what he did on the floor. Like, you could just see the talent oozing out of him, like, all the time. Like, it seemed like anytime he touched the ball, like, good things were happening, which from a rookie center, like, you don't typically expect to see some of the things that he does out there. So Evan at a B plus for me. He just misses out on getting that A grade. If he was still healthy and still playing, I think he'd be right there with the 2 players that I have at A minus. But I mean, he just misses out just because of the injury more than anything else.
Yeah, we're, hand in hand on this one right now. I have him as a B plus too. And, getting Cleveland out of the doldrums of the NBA conversations into any sort of relevancy bolstered him up a lot. But then you look at the actual play. I mean, 8 rebounds, over 2 assists per game. The defense is there, playmaking. He looks like he can do a little bit of everything. I'm hearing Chris Bosh comparisons already with him in his young NBA career. You can kind of see it. The playmaking at his size kind of reminds me a little bit of a Lamar Odom. And then the defense is there too. So he's a really funky, gadgety player. And for a team that plays 2 undersized guards in their backcourt before Colin Sexton got hurt, when they had the backcourt of Sexland, they kind of went super tall in their front court. And, you look at a team like Portland. I discussed this on Murr Murphy's show Up in Flames, who you're listening, to also on the Nothing But Net channel on Dash Radio. I discussed this with Mo too, Kenneth, that maybe Portland should take a page out of Cleveland's book and just go super tall in their front court with Dame and CJ. But Evan, playmaking, rebounding, scoring, the 3-point shot isn't really there, but he shows flashes of it. He looks like that shot will travel outside the arc eventually as he continues to figure out his game. I really love the impact that he's having for this team overall. And Kenneth, again, Cleveland is being talked about for real in conversations now, much like New York was last season. Do you think that the Cavaliers might have a little bit of a Cinderella season, or all these injuries are kind of squashing the fire for you?
I think the injuries just squashed it. I mean, not even the Mobley injury, like Sexton missing the rest of the year. Like, that's your leading scorer. And when you're a team that's at best probably play in game range, that's really tough. So I think that they just miss out this year. But next year, I think that they've got a lot of things to be excited about. To be honest, this year wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing to continue to not win a lot of games, because if you can get a top pick next year, bring everyone back healthy next year, just give Mobley minutes when he's back, give Garland minutes. Like, these guys are still super young in the league, early 20s. Like, we often forget the way that the league is now, that giving those guys a ton of minutes is huge. And it pays off in 3 or 4 years if you wait long enough, because a lot of teams, they abandon it the second they see any form of success. And it's like, sometimes it's okay to stay put and give it a bit of time. But the next guy that we were going to talk about, he's my highest graded player at number 4.
Mine as well. Let's get into him. And
like, what's surprising about Scotty Barnes was, like, I even said on draft night, I hated the pick for Toronto. I'm on record with it, but I'll own the fact that I hated the pick at the time. The only reason why I hated the pick was because I thought offensively he's going to take a long time to figure it out. I'm wrong. Like flat out. I'm wrong about that. 15, 8, and 3, shooting 49%. The reason why he's my highest graded player too, I guess he's tied as my highest graded player at an A-, but his player efficiency rating is the second highest on the Raptors. He's ahead of OG Anunoby as far as player efficiency goes this year. The only player ahead of him is Fred VanVleet, and he's barely ahead of him in that category as well. So, like, when a rookie is potentially your best player, Like, that is huge. And this is why Toronto could still be scary a couple years from now. Like, it may not be time to go like full on rebuild, because when you've got Barnes, when you've got OG, you've got Van Vliet, maybe hold on to Siakam, you're starting to build something there. And Masai Ujiri, he's shown an ability to draft better than most in the league. So even if they have a pick in the 10 to 15 range, there's no reason why they can't find another gem there, and suddenly they're back in the Eastern Conference hunt once again. So I'm a huge fan of Scotty at an A minus. What did you grade him as?
Exact same grade. We're hand in hand on this one as well. I gave Scotty an A minus because the playmaking. I think coming out of Florida State, we all saw him flirt with the passes a lot, and that took scouts by surprise to see him already doing it at this level as early as he is. I mean, this is what I think guys were looking at maybe year 2 or 3, that eventually he could come in and become a really good distributor, especially with other guards on the team like Van Vliet that you had mentioned earlier. But already having such good success as a playmaker, that's there. The defense, I think everyone understood that day one that Scotty was going to be one of the better defenders on whatever team that he went to. And that's infectious, man. I mean, when you got a guy coming in as a teenager saying, hey, look, this is how we need to be playing defense, that sets the tone, because all these other dudes that want to make money have to match that same energy, especially in a team like Toronto. It's super infectious because Kenneth, you could speak on this better than I, being, Canadian, is just that it's a weirder team than any other organization, right? So you kind of have to have a weird little niche thing about your team, scrappy defense, and a bunch of switchable dudes that all are about, 6'7" to 6'10", who can guard 1 through 5. That kind of looks like the model that Toronto is going after. I mean, even their second round pick, Benton, has come in and played well, doing a little bit of that same thing. So Scotty's offensive impact is already there. The defense we knew was going to happen. He's living up to the billing as a defender. He's exceeded the billing as an offensive player. The fact that he was selected 4th took people by surprise a little bit, like how you and I were on draft night. But if you look at most people's big boards or mock drafts, he wasn't too far back.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, he's exceeded where you and I thought that he would be. And that's why I gave him an A minus as well, Kenneth.
Yeah, I think it's fair. And you talked about Toronto being that bit of a different team, because when you look at that locker room, Siakam, not a highly touted guy. Van Vliet was undrafted. Like, he's a guy that, he's just earned his way, and they use their G League team really well. I think they're one of the best teams at doing that, of developing talent, and they're not scared to give young guys minutes. A lot of these other teams, like, we're going to talk about some guys that I didn't even give grades, because how do you evaluate them when they're not getting any minutes at all? And some of these teams aren't even winning games. So that's puzzling to me why, they're not giving them a bit more time out there. But that transitions well into, I guess we could do these players together because they're on the same team, in Jalen Suggs and Franz Wagner. Now, Wagner went a couple picks later, but, when we're evaluating Orlando this year, they're both in the starting lineup consistently. And part of it's been due to injuries, but part of it's been due to one guy really performing well and another guy still maybe figuring it out a bit, at least in my opinion. So how did you grade Suggs and Wagner so far this year?
Well, let's break down Suggs first. I was on record as this guy was the second best player in the draft, and I still hold that he could eventually become one of the better players out of this draft. But he has not lived up to my expectations. Even at the number 5 pick, I don't think that he's lived up to being a top 5 pick. Everything that we said that we're not going to talk about, I'm still not going to talk about, but those unmentionables do play a part in it, right? The fact that a player that was also drafted on this team, and Franz Wagner, who came on later, that looks better, that hurts him, in my opinion, as well. And the fact that, look, Cole Anthony is balling out this season. I mean, the guy is already one of the better rebounding guards, one of the more fun interviews that you see in the NBA already. And by the way, he's kind of their best player this season. So the fact that Suggs is coming in and not really meeting my expectations, he's kind of falling a little bit under the radar. Hey, but don't get me wrong, he's had a couple strong performances as of late, but ultimately I went with a D+. I could be persuaded into a C-, but because of where I personally have him on all of my boards and things like that, I went with the D plus because I'm a little bit disappointed in him, but ultimately I still feel like he can turn things around. And then getting into Franz Wagner, this is a dude that I was super low on. Like I'm talking like high second round pick low. And when he was taken where he was, I was like, hey Orlando, what are you doing? Like this is just a 3-point shooter, maybe a little bit of a playmaker. But this guy is super versatile, really capable defender. He is showing that shooting ability, but he can attack the basket as well. Playmaking flashes are being shown as well. I really like Franz Wagner a lot. And just like you talked about earlier with Scotty Barnes, I was wrong on Franz Wagner. I'm glad I'm wrong on Franz Wagner. I'm glad when guys can overcome whatever expectations people put on them, including myself. I can be happily wrong for a Franz Wagner, and I'm also just unhappy with Jalen right now. Kenneth, what are your grades on those guys?
I'm not quite as low on Suggs as you. I had him at a C plus, but the big reason why is because Orlando was a big question mark coming into this year. Like we knew they weren't going to win a lot of games, but it was kind of like who was going to step up. And I think that's why a lot of people thought, well, Suggs is a top 5 pick. He's got to come in right away. Look at the leadership that he showed at Gonzaga. Like he's a guy that, can come in and set the tone right away. But they have a guy that in Cole Anthony that's just been phenomenal for them out of the gate. Like you look at his numbers at 19, 6, and 6. Like I don't think anyone really expected him to be this good. I had him as a guy that I really liked coming into the year, but even I didn't have these expectations for him. So when you have other guys within the organization like a Cole Anthony, Mo Bamba coming back from the injury, Wendell Carter playing well, I think it's just they're getting contributions from a bit more well-established players there. And I think Suggs has fit in pretty well there. His shooting is low, which is the story of this show is just low shooting numbers.
Yes.
But if you look at the numbers, 12, 3, and 3 for being the secondary guard, because Cole's the main guy there right now in the way that he dominates the basketball. He's had multiple double-doubles and stuff. So I'm not as low on Suggs because I still think the way that he's fitting into that starting lineup is really good. He's just having to do less because other guys have stepped up to do more. When it came to Wagner, I was also low on him, not quite as low as you. I thought that he should have been like either tail end of lottery or like early 20s type pick. But he's surprised me as well. And a lot of it does have to do with opportunity. Like you look at the fact that Jonathan Isaac's missed time, and they decided to put Terrence Ross on the bench and say, like, look, you're our 6th man. I thought that he might move into the starting lineup this year and Wagner would come off the bench. But him getting those starters minutes, he's 13, 4, and 2. He's shooting 44%, so actually a lot higher than a lot of these other rookies. So I had him at a B plus because he gets drafted behind Suggs, has outplayed him. And so that's why I have him there, just because I think the expectations were a lot higher for Suggs, and then Wagner's really performed where he is. But we jumped ahead a couple picks talking about Wagner, but because they were together in Orlando, it felt right to cover him at the same time. So jumping back to the guy who went number 6, and you and I know, hated this pick on draft night. I still hate this pick. I still think that it doesn't make a lot of sense. But he hasn't played terribly as far as the offensive side of the ball. Like Josh Getty in Oklahoma City. I mean, this is a team, once again, we know they're not trying to win. Like, if anything, they want to lose because they got 50 draft picks in the next 6 or 7 years.
They've actually won more, I think, already than a lot of people would have expected. Yeah.
And it's like, but you look at his numbers and like 10, 7, and 5, like not terrible numbers. Now, I mean, if you watch Oklahoma City, like the numbers are a bit deceiving because defensively he is, I don't want to say a disaster because he's a rookie, and I think
he's that would be unfair.
He's an eyesore at this point because, Oklahoma City, we know that they're not going to be great defensively. And maybe Lou Dort at times has to kind of make up for the fact that like Shea's not a great defender, neither is Getty. But man, like it's tough to watch him sometimes. Like he gets beat a lot. And so I had to give him a C minus because the numbers look good, but like, man, the defense is something, and maybe it just, he needs a year or two to figure it out, or maybe it's a bit of a lack of effort on the defensive side. Like you're so in tune with getting guys involved on the offense and getting rebounds and stuff, that you're not thinking about like, hey, I have to go down to the other end and actually like make up for, some of these things. So where did you have Getty so far?
Same thing, C minus, and I had to get over any sort of bias that I had, and that's one of the crazy things about scouting and then doing a show like this, is because it's like, okay, like this is where I think that they're going to be long term, even though that they are showing flashes now. I still don't think some of these guys are going to pan out to the expectations that were placed on them. However, Josh Giddey has played very well. He's exceeded the Disney character, looking like he's, he looks like he's
not
filming
Zach
a Disney
Wilson.
movie.
He's not Zach Wilson in the NFL. His Disney show maybe had a bit more success in his league.
Correct. He looks like he's filming a Disney Channel original movie about basketball out there playing in Oklahoma City, but he's exceeded all of my expectations. The defense that you're pointing out is because he's really not he's not physically ready to be an NBA level defender. The offense is there, even though he is playing in an NBA now to where the rules are kind of facilitating a higher level of defense. Playing in the NBL, he's already used to contact on the offensive end. He really wasn't a good defender in the NBL either. You kind of have to hide him or scheme him, which is crazy because he's got a lot of length. But with that being said, he's not super strong. The vision is there. All the playmaking ability that everyone was lauding on him is there. I don't think that it's quite next level, but he's showing that he could be a capable, secondary playmaker alongside Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in Oklahoma City. I went with the C minus because based on where he's selected, the amount of hype around him, and the fact that he's not really blowing things away. He's just C's get degrees, dude. He's performing adequately, and that's why I gave him an adequate grade, I feel.
Yeah, I think it's adequate, as you said. Like, may take some time on the defensive side, and he's not asked to be the number one scorer. Like, that's Shai's job. As much as they wanted to get rid of him in the summer, which still annoys me to this day that he was even remotely rumored in trade talks that you're going to give up the lone piece at the time that I thought they should really be sold on. So, next guy, I guess, would be Jonathan Kuminga, but like,
he hasn't played much at all.
You can't grade a guy that's not playing. And, I guess this would be the right time, too, to rule out Moses Moody, who it's pretty well documented I had as a top 5 pick in the draft for me this year. He's also not seeing any minutes. Like, you technically give them an incomplete because it's like they're not showing up for class. Like, how do you grade something when there's no class happening at all? So,
well, they got doctor's notes right now, right? I mean, they're not inexcused absences. They're just they're
showing up. They're just like, it's like they're refusing to complete their work, but it's because they're not being handed the test.
Yeah. And when they do show up, I mean, you see a little bit of the reasons, like, okay, like this is a smart kid. It looks like he could, possibly be really successful. We just need to get him a little bit more time and attention. Maybe summer school, you know what I mean? Like maybe some summer classes.
Do you think both of them should just be playing in the G League this year? Because when we're talking about Golden State with Klay Thompson coming back in a month, it was said today that he's probably coming back a week before Christmas.
Merry Christmas, Golden State.
Merry Christmas. That makes my Christmas even more exciting, getting to watch Klay play on Christmas with his Splash brother and Steph. But you look at the lineup that they're running, like Otto Porter's off the bench, Bayalins is off the bench. Like, there's a lot of guys there. So would it make more sense for them to just have these guys playing in the G League all year, getting minutes, or what do you think about it?
I mean, these guys aren't two-way players, right? So there's not a certain set number of G League games that they have to play, or they can only play X amount of professional games before, they have to spend the rest of the time in the G League. Get these guys experience. They're young. You want to keep them kind of disciplined, right? Like they're still men, but they're young men. You want to get them in Golden State. They have a good system of developing, draft picks and young talent. Just let them come in there. They already know, being drafted to Golden State, that they're not going to be the next best thing day one. Keep those guys grounded. Keep them involved in, off the court activities, film sessions and things like that, but get these guys in some sort of game action in the G League. Yeah, I agree. I think that makes a lot of sense, but keep them ready is what I'm saying, because it only takes, one bad game for somebody to become injured, like a Poole or a Lee or someone along those lines. And then you might look at a Moses Moody coming into the rotation. So we'll see what happens. Ultimately, though, I think keeping them in G League is going to be what's best for them, though, Kenneth.
I would think so, because as it's tough to get ready on game day and like go through like and be a professional and all that, knowing that you're not going in tonight, because that's the way that it's been for them. And if you are going in, you're going in for 3 minutes in an up by 25 with 5 minutes to go type situation. So it's tough to get mentally prepared sometimes, knowing that like, look, I'm putting up these shots and like, and I'm getting ready, but like my name's not going to get called at the end of the day. And they don't have that. Like, veterans do that all the time, right? Like if you were like a Jared Dudley a couple years ago, you knew like, hey,
Maurice
chances are,
Spates, yeah.
right? Like these guys that they know that, look, I'm probably not going in, but I have played in minutes before, so I know to be ready. And that's where I think it would differ with a couple of these rookies. But that moves us on to Davion Mitchell, which, I mean, we got to talk firstly about the news out of Sacramento that just happened about a half hour before we hopped on here, which is that Luke Walton is out as the head coach in Sacramento. They weren't out to a great start. Once again, I think they held on to him too long to begin with. Like, it seemed puzzling why he was still a head coach, just because he got to fill in interim in Golden State behind one of the greatest teams we've ever seen. And that suddenly made him super ready to be a head coach in the NBA. But what do you think of Walton getting fired? The way that Mitchell's played, do you think this will impact maybe the role that he's going to have within this team? Because we do know that there's a lot of guards there. So what do you think of it?
Well, what's interesting is that we'll start with the Luke Walton comment. This is just Sacramento being Sacramento. Like, I'm not a big fan of dismissing coaches in the middle of the season because one, you missed out on all the guys that you could have had coming into this year, and you could have had a lot of optimism coming into the year, especially with a lot of young guys and guys outperforming the perception of them. You know, like a Harrison Barnes is playing tremendously well this season. Rashawn Holmes remains one of the most underrated players in the NBA. You come in with a fresh face, you know, fresh attitude, bright beginnings, all those things. Maybe these guys are highlighted a little bit better, and thus credit to the coaching, which looks good for the coaching and looks good for the front office, and the players feel better about themselves too, right? So now the season is essentially lost because you bring in Alvin Gentry, which, you know, again, a tremendous opportunity for a guy. And I'm tired of retreads. Like, Alvin Gentry has had numerous coaching opportunities. Get somebody new in there. You know, in the group chat earlier, shout out to the group chat. President Chris LeBron brought up a guy that I've been championing for a job for a few seasons now, that being Sam Cassell. It doesn't even matter how he does this season. The only thing is, you get him an opportunity, let him coach a team with a lot of guards, bring in a guard. You know, Sam Cassell could come in and really help out these guys like a Davion Mitchell, who is one of the most intense players already in the NBA. Off night, one of the best nicknames out there. And just to throw a grade out there for Davion Mitchell, I gave him a C+ because high expectations for him this season. The offense is not good at all, but that defense is there. And it's really hard to say, okay, because he's a really good defender, like, he can't get like one of the higher grades in my opinion, just because of the way I love defense, but the way that the game is played, like, if you can't really do anything on the offensive side of the ball, how really impactful are you with just defense in today's NBA? Next season, it might change. You know, if the rule changes continue to impact things for good, obviously his value is going to go up. And he's had a couple bad games here lately. But Davion Mitchell, C+. Back to the Kings in their coaching situation. Bring in his Sam Cassell. It doesn't matter how the team does for the rest of the year because you've already admitted defeat, and he can help a lot of really talented young guards. I mean, De'Aaron Fox, Buddy Hield's still on this team. Tyrese Halliburton, who I love, is on this team, and Davion Mitchell. You bring in a guy who I think is going to be, when he does get an opportunity, he's going to be one of the best player coaches in the NBA because teams are going to want to do whatever they can for him because he's well-traveled, been on a lot of rosters and organizations, super well plugged in. Please somebody give Sam Cassell a chance. I'm hoping Sacramento, but for Cassell's part, maybe it's better that it's not a team like Sacramento, maybe a team that has a shot at being successful somewhere down the line.
Yeah, this is a team that they don't have a direction. They've never really built a culture here. since the Chris Webber days, honestly. Like they've drafted some phenomenal individual talents in drafts and done absolutely nothing with it. And yeah, I hope it's just not a coaching carousel where they go in and hire a Van Gundy and then think
Please
that
don't hire
everything's
Van Gundy.
but even like some of these other guys, like you mentioned Alvin Gentry, like the guys had like 6 different coaching opportunities. Like at a certain point, like it's okay to go a different route with this. I have him at a C plus too. It's tough coming off the bench, but he is getting minutes. Like he's 25-minute per game guy, 9, 4, and 2. Shooting isn't there once again, story of our show. But when we're talking about Sacramento, when you're not winning a lot of games, it means that they're pushing the starters a lot more. Like because some of these other teams they are up like 30 or let's say they're up 15 with like 4 minutes to go, then they're able to sub guys out. It just gets them those additional minutes. And like Sacramento's not in a situation where that happens very often. They're usually on the losing side of it. So they're pushing their starters that extra bit, trying to get back into the game, and it can hurt guys like Mitchell from that perspective. But defensively, he's been great, and I don't have a lot of gripes with him. I think he's a great rotational piece. I think it's time for Sacramento to move on from Buddy. Like at some point when you keep saying trade, like eventually you just got to ship him out and like let Mitchell be the 6-man, run the second unit, because right now that second unit is Buddy Hield playing 30 minutes, putting up 15 shots, and that really doesn't get you anywhere in the league when you're constantly trailing. So I think that's something that they should do to help free him up a bit. Zaire Williams would be our next guy. He's close to an incomplete for me.
Yeah, I considered incomplete as well. But if you look at the minutes played, he's far exceeding some of these other guys.
Incomplete, but then he's showing up to class all the time. So correct.
It's like, okay,
but why? So like that's where I have him at that D grade, because I'm like, I'm not that crazy about Zaire, like what he's doing in Memphis, where there is a lot of guys that play his position, and they just got Dylan Brooks back. So I think that's going to further bury him in that lineup with Memphis. And they're going to be competing every single night, trying to win games to get into the playoffs this year. So I have him like just missing out on, like, I guess he's a D grade just because he's played, but like hasn't put up a lot of numbers. If we're talking about the next 2 guys, like James Bouknight, I'd say he's incomplete because of the amount that he's played. Josh Primo, I mean, 3 minutes doesn't really inspire you to give a draft grade for him. So that leaves us.
I want to fell him just because he was taken too daggum high.
Yeah, but, that's fair. But like that's another situation where I talked about it, where if you reach on this guy to not play him, like if you were that high on him on a team that's also not winning games, like, why do we keep seeing some of these guys getting significant minutes in San Antonio? And you know what? Maybe part of that is just Popovich thinking that this kid hasn't earned the minutes yet, and completely fair, because Pop is a legendary coach. And, you know, if he thinks that's what's best, I'm not going to question one of the greatest coaches of all time about his personnel decisions. But it is interesting to say the least. So if we're talking about the last guy in the lottery, that'd be Chris Duarte.
Well, excluding Moses Moody, who was the last pick, but we talked about him earlier.
Yeah. So the final lottery guy to chat about would be Chris Duarte. And this is where my second A- comes in.
Okay.
Because I love the fact that he's come in as the oldest player in the draft and he's getting 30 minutes a night.
Yeah.
And I think he's earned it. And it's not just like everyone will point to that first game of like, man, he came out and scored 27, but like, he's getting minutes over like good NBA players. Yeah. And I think it just goes to show the impact that he's having on that team. 13, 4, and 2, 43%, 39% from 3. Like the numbers are there. And the fact that he's on an Indiana team that's going to be scrapping for that play-in game, I think I had to give him an A- because everyone was super low on him because of the age thing. I was one of those people. I know other people like Duarte, but at least for me personally, I questioned, well, what's his real fit going to be at 24 coming into the league? He's coming in like a 24-year-old. Like that's all that there is to it. He's playing like an established guy in the league. And so he may be the oldest rookie here, but he's definitely playing like a seasoned vet. So what do you have Duarte at?
Yeah, well, just, again, incompletes for Book Knight and Primo due to their playing time. And I echo a lot of the same sentiments that you had about Zaire for D, just what not doing enough. But Chris Duarte, if this progress report came out like after week 3, I'd probably have him at that A level, but as time has progressed, I think he's going to be waxing and waning throughout the season, much like these other rookies. I gave him a solid B because he's performing well. He's exceeded my expectations, but again, I think a lot of the hot start in, again, weeks 1 through 3 were there. What we're seeing now, I think, is a little bit of regression, and it's hard to call it regression as early as we are, right? But we're seeing it kind of come down a little bit. But I still give him a B because I think, even the next 2 weeks, if we're looking at these grades, I still think that he's going to kind of baseline a little bit about where he's at now. Like over the next, between now and the next 2 weeks, I think that's probably going to be about the baseline of where he's going to be overall throughout the season, which I think is a B. I want to you could talk me into a B plus, but I can't give him an A minus. I'm not at that spot yet to give him an A, but I think a good strong B, that I think that's adequate. And it might be, just kind of apropos about all the narratives and the storylines that came on with him in the season and where he's performing now. Maybe I'm just going to keep underrating him just to keep on seeing him prove every other sort of expectation and analysis on him wrong. But I think a B right now is good. If you look at all my grades that I have so far, I have 1, 2, 3 guys that have a higher grade than him right now. So at a B, I think that's pretty strong based on what we've seen so far from him this year.
Yeah, mine's more so to do with the draft position that he went and the fact that he is earning the opportunity that he is. That's why I have him a bit more highly rated than even like a Mobley or a Wagner that, their numbers might be a little bit better or on par with his, but I give the edge to the guy that went a bit later and wasn't expected to put up the numbers that he did.
And that's fair.
So with that, we're going to move over to, we each have a nominee of a player outside of the lottery, a player that, we've maybe kept an eye on this year that we've liked so far. So who was your nominee outside of the lottery?
Well, we both discussed our nominee. This was really the only discussion point that we had, and we just wanted to avoid any sort of double talk. I think looking forward from this conversation, both of us would have picked both of these guys if we could only pick 2, because I think these are the only 2 worth mentioning as of right now this highly. If we're talking about lottery considerations and where these guys are performing already, I think these 2 guys would be in almost anybody else's conversation when we're talking about honorable mentions in lottery conversation. So I went with Herb Jones out of Alabama. I had a second round grade on him. He was taken in the second round, but I was like a mid to late second round guy. He was an early second. And if you look at New Orleans, I mean, they're just absolutely abysmal. I mean, Zion Williamson, will he, won't he ever play? Jonas Valanciunas is having a strong season, but it's just one of the worst teams in the NBA, which blows my mind because you have the story of New Orleans, right? They have a strong young player, injury prone. Can they help him succeed? We already saw what the first story looked like. This is the second act. It's not looking much different at all. And again, coaching situation, things like that, lather, rinse, repeat for New Orleans. But Herb Jones has been one of the brightest points on this team. Now, if you go and look at his stats, you'll look at the numbers and you'll be like, Steven, what are you talking about? Please just watch basketball, ladies and gentlemen. Like if you're going to argue against where I have this guy solely based on stats, just go watch basketball. Go watch him lock up Paul George for a possession. Like, this guy is one of the best defenders already in the NBA. Shout out to the NBA for making defense matter again. Herb Jones is one of the best defenders in this NBA. And I think that offense is going to continue to come along because, listen, he's already a really good. Well, I won't say really good. That's a little bit hyperbole there, but he's a solid decision maker with the basketball in his hands too, who can set up his teammates. So that's why I went with Herb Jones as my nominee, Kenneth.
I love his defense. Like, I really do. I wish that I was getting more out of him on the offensive side, but that wasn't really what he was drafted to do. Like,
no.
Because as you said, if you're not watching, 6-3-1 doesn't look like great, but
it's not sexy.
But 48% shooter. So It's not like he's shooting 30%, averaging 6 points. Like, it's just he's picking his spots when to score. He does a good job of doing so. Probably most nights he's 3 of 5 or 2 of 5 shooting, and that's where you see it. But overall, I mean, I don't have a lot of complaints about Herb Jones. Like, yeah, I wish New Orleans was winning games, because at this point it's kind of just not an if Zion leaves, but when he leaves, it feels like. So
Tragic, man.
they continue to miss the mark on this. Maybe when he comes back, you throw him in with Valanciunas and Graham and Ingram, and they start winning games. But like we don't even know the real timeline on Zion yet coming back. So who truly knows whether or not we're going to get to see that for a long enough period of time? But Jones is taking advantage of his minutes. A later pick, 24 minutes per game. They clearly see that he can defend, which is something that the Pelicans haven't done since Anthony Davis left. So that's big for them to have a guy that actually defends on the roster. My guy that I nominated was Bones Highland, a guy that I love the pick by Denver at the time. And like he's a C grade for me. Like, I think he's playing right on par with where I thought he was going to be. Like, we've seen Michael Porter Jr.'s already starting to miss some time. Jamal Murray, we knew wasn't going to play. They had Monte Morris step up to take that point guard spot. And a lot of people would be like, oh, well, that's what, Highland was supposed to do. You don't expect a rookie to come in late in the first round and play 30 minutes a night. But in 16 minutes a night, he gives you 8, 2, and 2. Like, so a rookie taking advantage of his minutes, inefficient shooting, story of the show, doesn't matter. Like, he's coming in, he's playing 16 minutes a night. And look at where they have Denver right now. Like overall, as a team around Jokic, who's playing like an MVP once again this year in the way that he controls the game in so many facets. Like, Highland's just playing a solid role for this group. And when you're a later first round pick, like, what more could you want? So what do you think of Highland so far?
I love him. He should have been taken higher. But here's the thing, is that you'll see it in this year's draft too. I truly feel like is that the league is so deep at point guard or hybrid guard. Like, we could get into the debate about traditional, positions and where what positions actually should be nowadays. But there's a lot of dynamic guards in the NBA. There just are. So like, even though I had him higher on my board than where I had him on my mock draft, I actually had him getting drafted by the Lakers, which how good would that look right now if Bones was playing for LA? But Denver being fortunate enough to have this guy, fortunate enough to have him on the roster, with Murray being hurt, if he were to pass Monte Morris, like, that would prove two things to me. One, that Mike Malone is done with just being, just outright a rookie hater if he were to make that move. And then two, like, that would further solidify my stance on Bones, because it's hard to be a rookie being taken late in the first round, like you said, Kenneth, and then surpass a mainstay in an offense or on a team like a Monte Morris. Like, he's one of the best backup point guards in all of professional basketball. Denver loves him. His coach loves him. His teammates love him. The fans love him. If Bones were to come in with Murray being hurt and completely jump Monte Morris, like, everyone in the world would have to feel the way that I feel about Bones Highland. And not everybody's there yet, which is okay. But Bones getting time to figure it out on a good team, playing alongside other really good playmakers, and for a team that has a chance to really do something this season, I love the pick. A C, I'd probably lean a little bit more on the C plus side. But again, it's not that far separated, and we didn't discuss it beforehand. But ultimately, yeah, man, love Nahshon on this team. I think he's doing a tremendous job. I think in most redrafts, you'll see him taken significantly higher moving forward.
For sure. And as the season goes on, I'm sure this won't be the last time we talk about rookies. It might be something that we revisit in another 6 weeks as we get to see these guys play some more. Might even touch on some guys that we didn't mention today, like an Alperen Sengun, who's been playing really well in Houston, and some other guys that have got some opportunities and played some quality minutes. So that pretty much wraps things up for the Breaking the Game show here on the Nothing But Net channel on Dash Radio. You can follow me on all social platforms at shooters_pod. You can find all my work there. I tweet out my daily betting article on Substack each day, but also you can go to Substack and find the Shooter Shoot page where you can sign up with your email and you can get them sent directly to you, which is also really huge. But Steven, this was a ton of fun, man. Why don't you tell the folks where they can find your work at home, and then you wrap us up?
Yeah, man. And as always, it's a pleasure and an honor to get to run the show with you, man. You do such tremendous work. I'm humbled just that you want to even co-host the show with me, man. So that means a lot. And please, just like Kenneth said, go and follow all of his work. I went and subscribed to the Shooter Shoot page as well. I looked at all the bets. I mean, this guy's giving you bets for any sport that you want to read. He's giving you analysis and reasons why. And he's posting the results there. Like, you have no reason not to go and follow my guy Kenneth here. But as for myself, you can follow me on Twitter at Stephen G. Hoops. You can follow me on Instagram at Stephen W. Gillespie. You can follow Breaking the Game at BTG NBA Pod on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and on YouTube. Shout out to the Off the Ball Network, which is where Kenneth and I contribute to. You can follow the Off the Ball Network on Twitter at OTB_network. You can follow Off the Ball Network at Instagram. Go and look at the Off the Ball YouTube channel, which is where we're streaming live right now. Shout out to the Off the Ball Network. And then I also have a Substack. It's Stephen G. Hoops. I just dropped a piece recently on why I think the upcoming draft class is going to be one of the more influential ones because of the depth at the kind of the power forward spot, if you want to call it that, and the lack of quality power forwards in the NBA right now. So really intriguing piece, a little bit of something in there for any type of hoop fan you are. Just please go and check that out. But if you're listening to us on the Nothing But Net channel on Dash Radio, Kenneth, what's the rundown for the rest of Off the Ball Monday, brother?
We got Shooters coming up right now. That's my show with special guest Ernest Silva. And following that, I believe we got the Hoopers right after that. So a couple more hours of Off the Ball Network coverage on here on Off the Ball Network Mondays.
Absolutely. Well, as for my co-host Kenneth, for myself, representing the Off the Ball Network and the lovely people over here at the Nothing But Net channel on Dash Radio, that is the end of our episode, and we'll catch up with y'all next time. Much love, everybody.